which we do not confront in ourselves, we will meet as fate. And with that, I'd like to introduce our guests for today's episode, the audience. First, Alex, we've got some business to attend to. Let's talk about the podcast. What have been some of your major takeaways of the last couple of episodes?
So actually, at the beginning of this, I was like, okay, I need to cut down my list because I have so many. So I'll start with one that's short and sweet. Josh Nass, when we interviewed him about ham radio, my big takeaway was that it was actually interesting.
Nice.
Moving on, I think when we talked to Mike Glover, it really helped me switch my mind around preparedness, just in general, in how people who are preppers, are crazy. When
Right.
After hearing him talk about it, it seemed like everybody else is crazy because they're focusing on the few instances that could just end your life. And if you spend even 10 minutes preparing for it, or $30, it could save your life or somebody else's life. So it was something that I just didn't realize how important that was and how little effort it really was. You don't have to go and build a bunker.
Right.
Do you want to take one?
Yeah, actually, I'll pick up on the Mike Glover one. So this is a switch that I had doing the research for the episode with him. And it became a big topic during the discussion. For me, that switch was the importance of community in disaster preparedness. So, you think about things like whether it's, we'll take some of the more common things like hurricane preparedness. You think of hurricane preparedness as, okay, make sure you're stocked up on enough food, make sure that you, board the windows up. I don't know. I don't live in a hurricane zone, at least not a major one. But you think about those things that you do to sort of hunker down you and your family. What you don't think about is, well, what is my extended network? What are my neighbors doing? What is my extended, maybe you might think about your extended family, but how am I going to make sure that I can be a community resource doing things like, knowing that the person down the street is somebody who needs oxygen. And this is also something that Josh Nass brought up in ham radio preparedness, thinking, okay, I also have a ham radio license. That person is on an oxygen tank. Maybe once this storm is over and there's destruction, I'm going to go check on them. And if they need oxygen, I'm going to key up on my radio to the local emergency coordination station and say, hey, Mrs. So-and-so down the street, we're in this area, is on an oxygen tank and has 2 days left of oxygen, right? Those are the kinds of community connections that you need in a preparedness scenario that you don't think about, because most of the preparedness community is like, oh yeah, always have your tourniquet, make sure you have enough food stocked up. Don't forget to stock up food for your dog. And make sure that you never take pictures of your house keys because people can reconstruct them from photographs. And it's like this community involvement is a huge aspect of that. So that was a switch that I had, not during the episode, but in the preparation for the episode.
Totally. Yeah, just to give you some insight into somebody who lives in South Florida in a hurricane zone, when I moved here, I learned how we deal with it. And it's don't pay attention and then regret it later. So
good. That's a strategy.
Yeah. Moving on to Sean Croxton's episode.
Yeah.
I think I had a lot of switches in that one, but one I wanted to focus on was limiting beliefs, because this is something that immediately when he said it, it stuck out to me as I do that. And I could name a bunch of instances where some I'd overcome and some I was like, oh, that's probably why. Mm-hmm. And for example, I think he might have used this one. People who the idea that people who are rich are greedy, right? And if you have that, it gives you a lot of subconscious implications. Therefore, if I get rich, I'm greedy. And it creates a lot of cognitive dissonance and, kind of rejection of the idea of wealth accumulation. And that translates out and, has fingers in all its different aspects of your life.
Yeah.
And I noticed that I do that. And I think it's because of kind of how I grew up. And there's a lot of capitalist kind of sentiment, very pro community, anti self enrichment. So I think even with our business, even when I'm trying to put a price on my workmanship of music composition, it's hard for me to want to actually charge what its actual value is, because it feels wrong to me, even
Yeah.
though what it is, that's my own issue. But it's just so hard. It's like I care about the workmanship and I care about pleasing the client. I don't care about the money. But
Right.
and over time that's like, okay, now I'm not making enough money. So I
Yeah.
can't win both of those. So it's a system, and I think that really kind of shined a light on that for me.
Yeah. That's awesome. I want to go back to the episode with Amanda from the dorm, and one of the ideas that, well, two of the ideas that she brought up that I've been thinking about. So one was transference and countertransference. So in therapy, that's the idea that you project onto, if you're the therapist, you project onto the client some personality that is actually more closely related to some problem or something you're having in your life. So for example, if you have an abusive ex-husband and you're dealing with a male client who's exhibiting behaviors that, related or not to your ex-husband, somehow remind you of him, that you're going to start treating the client in that way. And there's countertransference. I don't remember which one's which. The other one is where the client is doing that to the therapist. And the way that that relates to why people become therapists. So, you have a huge phenomena where people who have difficult mental health issues will seek out therapy training and begin helping other people in that transferent way, where it's like, oh, if I can help other people enough, maybe that will rub off and help me, but I never actually have to go and do the work to seek help myself. I never have to take that vulnerable step of admitting that I need help, because I can just help everybody else. And I think I've understood that a little bit implicitly, but I had never heard it in concrete enough terms that, like, that idea solidified for me. So that was more of a neutral switch. I didn't have the opposite perspective. I just didn't have a full perspective.
Totally. And to kind of combine that episode with Amanda with what you've already said about community, with preparedness, one of my switches for that episode was how important they've discovered community is in recovery from mental illness, and how often your relationships with other people are what's negatively impacting your life and holding you in patterns and routines and negative behavior or self-image. So it's really interesting to hear how they like kind of create a community among the I forget what they call clients or whoever.
Yeah. Yeah,
um
they're clients.
yeah, and how much that's helped it, with the, like she alluded to, upcoming studies with success rate being significantly higher than in other mental health recovery centers. So I
Yeah.
thought that was interesting. Another one I had was with Rupali Sharma, on Montessori education. Um, this one was pretty much a switch from the second I started looking into it,
Yep.
because the entire um, idea of it seems based, I can relate to. I don't remember what I learned in school, and I don't really care to. Everything that I retained and learned how to learn was through discovery, curiosity, learning about how to evaluate and assess information, and basically just out of my own drive to pursue learning, growth, and knowledge. And my parents were both teachers, so I had kind of an advantage at home where I had a lot of materials. It was almost set up like a Montessori school, right? I had games I could play, educational games. I had books. I had, could go outside and learn about different types of grasses and, weeds and trees, and identify trees based on the bark and the leaf shape, and, identify different types of animals and track them and stuff. There were so many different things I could do. And it was just because it was interesting. And I didn't have to be told, you need to learn 50 pages in the next week. And I can't give you a good reason why that's the case, because this. Well, why is that? And you can go up the chain until there's no answer, basically.
Yeah.
So I think the switch I had was just, it raised the question in my mind, why is this not the primary modality of our education system? And it seemed to confirm to me that these systems are just extremely difficult to change, right? When they have the inertia, they're hard to, they're just small iterations can be made, but it's this huge system with millions of people, that you can't just stop and start over. And that would kind of be the case if there was like, we're switching. And the other, my more personal take, which might be more controversial, is that our education system is not designed for us to learn, but to churn us out to be cogs in a machine, ready to be told what to do, and then for the school to serve as daycare for those cogs so they can be more efficient, and on and on and on again. So,
yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. That was just as much a switch for me. That's probably one of my favorite episodes that we've done as of late. I mean, it's hard to pick a real favorite, but that was the one that, I had the same reaction. Moving on, one cool thing that stuck with me from Jean-Luc, who was talking about music technology and interactive audio, and his story was his story working with Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails. And first of all, that's just awesome. But the story of how he actually got that job, where people were sending in CDs back then, that was the early 2000s, and when he asked Trent, why did you pick me? And he explained that like there was this big stack of CDs and his was the only one that actually had his name printed on the side. So like when you looked at the stack, you just kept seeing his name. And then when you pulled that one out, it was the only one with like a real cover on it. Like he had put work into an audition CD. And just going that extra mile to have great presentation, to show your personality. And of course, he also said everybody else sent in music that sounded like Nine Inch Nails because they're thinking, oh yeah, Trent Reznor, like this is what he likes. Whereas Jean-Luc just sent in like, here's what I can do. This is my stuff. It's cool. Yeah. And for all of those reasons put together, like that was what stuck out and got him the job. I thought that was amazing. And I've heard that advice before, of course, but until you hear stories like that enough, like it doesn't totally solidify how you apply that to your life.
And speaking of our episode of applying ideas to life, I was just listening back to that, and one of the things that John brought up was taking these ideas and implementing them right away, creating a schedule, creating something like that. And we actually took that idea you just mentioned, where the CD standing out, and have been creating mail-in cards to invite people to be on the podcast. So that's a tangible way that we've implemented an idea and hopefully continue to build this whole system and grow it and keep it going.
Yeah, we'll let you know when we get the first guest from the mail-in invites. We'll point them out on air. It'll be fun. Beyond that, Ray Batra came in, talked about Shift Up, and again, that was community. So that's three episodes at least where community has come up. It's almost as if community is an important part of life.
Wow, I feel like we should maybe base an episode on that.
Maybe we should. Do you have any other switches that you want to?
No, that was it for me.
That's the perfect segue. So, as community is so important, we wanted to do an episode where, every week, if you listen to this on the podcast side of things, you hear me give my little intro before the main recording that says, this was all recorded on a live Zoom call. People come in and are listening to this live and usually are there to contribute to the conversation, ask questions of the guest, have a conversation afterward. Well, this week we had a little discussion pre-podcast, got a couple of people to volunteer some switches that they've had. So now we are getting the community involved in creating an episode. So the question that we asked our audience is essentially, what is an idea or experience that has changed your life? And so for that, we will go ahead and start with Shelley.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Shelley. Tell us your
Um,
story.
Okay, I will. Well, but first I wanted to say thanks, Chase and Alex, for having me here and for doing this podcast. And as I've been watching, since I'm relatively new to 52 Living Ideas, you're both very inspiring in your leadership and how you're really digging into uncovering truths and being self-evaluative. And I commend you on that, and just continue, go forth. You're doing a great job. So you're welcome. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to talk about how I went from being a stay-at-home homeschooling mom of 5 boys to being single and on welfare, and now to being a career-oriented, successful woman. I'm going to try and be as concise as I possibly can in it. So I want to say that it's funny, you're just talking about the Montessori school, and I can really identify with that. I loved homeschooling my kids and creating an environment of learning for them and really meeting their needs. And so I felt very fulfilled in that role. I loved that role. One day I began questioning my husband about some money choices he had been making. He had some struggles financially prior with his business. And so prior, I had no access to our finances or anything. And through a series of events, I was managing the funds and was watching over things. And so I asked him one day, and I said, hey, some things aren't really lining up here. Can you explain to me what's going on? This was in 2010, so a decade ago. And at that time, I was still homeschooling 3 children. I had my 2 oldest boys were in private school. I began questioning and pressing my husband, and he ended up pulling a gun out of our closet, attempting to commit suicide. And I wrestled the gun away from him in front of my 3 younger children, beat him into submission over the head with the gun case, all the while calling the cops. So that was the pivotal event when my entire life really fell apart. My life was nothing that it had really appeared. My ex-husband subsequently was convicted of a Ponzi scheme and ended up in prison. And so here I was, single, no career, and when I say no financial resources, I mean literally 0 cash dollars. So I had people leaving, anonymous donors leaving food on my front porch to feed my children. I had people from my church come in and start selling things off so I could have cash in my pocket. I immediately had to go get on welfare. During this time, I had some tremendous anxiety, as you can imagine. And this is the point where I hope I inspire whoever's listening to this, that it is worth fighting to overcome your fears in every area of life. So I had this tremendous anxiety, and I really clung to a verse in the Bible that is 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. And that just kept coming back to me and coming back to me. And I was almost unable to think because of the anxiety. But out of that birthed a mantra, and that mantra was, I will not allow fear to dictate my destiny. And it began to shape every single choice I made. So the first thing I had to do was I had to get a job. And I got a job that was a part-time job. And then I had to get my boys in some kind of some kind of help to deal with the mental trauma, right? So that was part of the goal. I got ourselves somewhat stable, but I was still on welfare, and I was just determined to get us off welfare. My whole goal was I did not want to be a burden to society, and I did not want to be a burden to my children in my old age. So I just faced my fear. I picked up and moved to a town that I had never been to before. And I went back to school and took some courses. I thought I was living in a very small town. I had no understanding of corporate America or anything really beyond my very, very small homeschooling world that I lived in. So I moved to Augusta, Georgia, where I live now. I went back to school, and I ended up out of that taking some really hard science courses. So I thought that I would do something in medicine because I love medicine and I love science. And that didn't play out. I really loved it, loved going back to school. But what did happen is through that series of events, I ended up getting the job with a large corporation where I am now. In the course of 4 years, I've gotten about 3 substantial promotions. And today I'm in escrow closing on a house, October 2nd. And I remember when I moved here and I'm using my EBT card and to buy groceries for my kids, and I'm humiliated every time I use it. I'm just mortified. And I think back to that woman, who had nothing. And here I am today, a career woman. And even though I loved homeschooling and loved that life, and I grieved leaving that life, I love my life now. I love the life that I have. And I really believe that is because I said, I am not going to let fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of rejection keep me from taking a step forward. And so that would be the lesson I learned from my switch, my change from one life to another, is that don't allow fear to dictate. Don't allow fear to dictate your future. Take the step. And that's my story.
Wow, Shelley, that amazing. Thank you.
Sure.
So I kind of want to follow up more. Do you have any place where you have a public presence, like a blog or anything like that? If not, if you ever decide to have that kind of thing in the future and people are interested in asking you questions about your story, following up, just let me know. I'll make sure that links to whatever end up in the description, because that's incredible. I love that. I will not allow fear of anything to keep me from taking a step forward.
I will not allow fear to dictate my destiny. The whole thing is that it's your potential. Like, speak to yourself about your potential. You have every potential. And just because you're going in this trajectory here and your aim is here, don't be as scared of course correcting, right? When it changes, then course correct. And then take the step here. And then you course correct there, take the step here. And I have to say, I've failed way more than I've succeeded, right? So these 3 promotions that I've gotten that have been pretty substantial, one, I worked my ass off for them. but 2, I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. But anyway, you get the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right. And next up is Stacy.
Okay. Wow. So I have to say that, Shelley, if you wrote a book, I would buy it for everyone I know.
Yeah.
That is just an amazing story. And I would never say should, but if you were to, let us know. And I would be the first to read it, and I'll let everybody else know. And second, there are these people who everyone says, oh, you don't want to follow so-and-so. Like when Martin Luther King gave a speech and the next guy was up, you didn't want to be the next guy because, oh my God, how can you follow that? I feel like the next guy right now. My story is so mundane. And I guess I'll kind of start with, well, yeah, I'll just tell it. Hopefully I won't go too long, but the backstory of it is that I'm a kind of geeky person. I grew up reading a lot, sort of a geeky kid, loving science and technology and math. But I had some things that were kind of, I would say, working against me a little bit. So some were good and some were not. So like I went to Catholic schools most of my life, and there were really good aspects of that. But there were also some kind of backwards aspects. In particular, I had a really strong interest in math, and the way that math is taught or was taught back then in Catholic schools was very strict, rote kind of teaching. And you really didn't deviate from exactly what you were taught because you were doing it wrong. And my head had already evolved, even before I had gone to school, some ways for me to do math. And they weren't like what we were being taught in school. So I would find, for example, with simple arithmetic, that I would get a lot of things wrong all the time, unless I did it my way. But if I did it my way and the nuns caught me doing it my way, they would, whack, no, don't do it that way. You have to do it the right way. And then I'd get through it, but I wasn't always getting the right answers doing it, quote, the right way. Just had my own method. And then kind of later, I think it was 8th grade or so, we were learning about square roots. And this is for people who are not mathematicians, maybe a little technical, but taking the square root of a negative number. And my teacher said, oh, you can't do that. And left it at that. And I went home and I thought about it and I thought, man, that's just crazy. And I noodled around on some paper. But oh, by the way, when I was in 8th grade, I was younger than everybody else because I had skipped a grade as well. So I was already young, starting school, and I skipped a grade, so that made me even younger. But I went home and I kind of came up with this way of like, well, if you could take the square root of a negative, and I had my own word for what that would be, and then what would happen? And I came up with all the mathematics of it, and I went back to school and told my teacher, hey, look, I invented this really cool thing. You can take the square root of a negative. And she said, oh, yeah, you're going to learn about that next year. They're called imaginary numbers. Okay, so we're going to learn about that later. But on the plus side, I had figured some things out. But I kept having people telling me, no, you're just not good at this, not good at this. And there was another aspect of it is that people were telling me, you should find something more suited to a person like you, which is a little bit code word, right? They were basically saying and encouraging to some of my classmates who had different skin tone to do the math and to push themselves. But for me, no, you just go do something else. And so that was a little discouraging. Well, 9th grade, in an all-boys Catholic school, and I got one of my algebra, pre-algebra, or whatever tests back. And my teacher, whose name is Dr. Alpiner, I don't know if he's even still alive, but if he's out there and is around, he changed my life. And it was funny because he was actually the one Jewish teacher in the all-boys Catholic school. So it was funny. But he came over and he gave me my test back and he said, you're really good at this, but you need to get a calculator. And I said, what do you mean I'm good at this? I'm terrible at math. I hate math. I hate math. He said, no, you're really good at it. You understand the algebraic concepts, but your calculations are wrong. And I said, well, that's because I like to do it a different way. And he said, well, show me. So I showed him. And he said, oh, yeah, that's called the Russian peasant technique. I said, what? And so I looked it up, and and sure enough, doing math left to right and holding the intermediate results, so you only have one intermediate result to hold and all this kind of crazy stuff, that is an actual technique. And he said, yeah, just do that then, because then you'll get the right answers. Well, fast forwarding a little bit, in 10th grade, I finished my pre-calculus, and by 11th grade, I'd done AP calculus. The math gave me a boost in physics. So by 11th grade, by 11th grade, I had actually done advanced placement, calculus, physics, and English. So I got those college credits out of the way before I was even a senior in high school. But that, and then I met some other budding mathematicians, and we just took off together. We were just unstoppable at that point. But that really changed me. And if you look kind of behind me now, you'll see math books like crazy, adventures in number theory, and calculus books, and all kinds of physics books, and all kinds of things like that. When we go on vacation and we're sitting on the beach, I'm reading a math book. I mean, that's how much I am into it. And going from that, oh, you should do something else in 8th grade, to that switch, that teacher, that person who saw the potential and just gave me permission to do what I could do. That was just huge.
Yeah, incredible. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, it's. I mean, there are two aspects to that, right? Like, in one sense, it's almost instinctual to say, like, oh, well, you got lucky that you had this person who gave you the permission. But then at the same time, like, knowing you as I do, I almost feel like that would have been inevitable. It was just a matter of time, because your personality is such that, like, you would have pursued those things. But the fact that you had that switch at that time, at that moment, I mean, that's awesome.
Thanks. Well, and it did one other thing for me, and that is that it made me look out for people who have that potential too. And slight plug is Detroit is Limitless. If you go and look that up, you'll find that there's a little documentary about a person like that, who is just actually two kids who are in Detroit, and people don't think about Detroit in this way, and they should. But if you look up Detroit is Limitless, it's amazing, the story of these kids. And people tend to disregard different people who are different. So like some of these kids, their grammar may not be the best, and they may have a little bit of that, sort of inner city twang going in their voices, and they'll use slang and whatever. But they are absolutely brilliant. And if you listen, and if you work on the substance, then it's just amazing. And you'll see that with some of these kids. Like the one kid, like I said, if you just listen to him talk, you probably dismiss him. But if you listen to what he's really saying and not just the sound, oh my goodness, he's a genius. He's probably going to be one of the next big computer science geniuses out there. And there's a young lady in the documentary as well. I don't know as much about her because I haven't worked with her as much, but just watching her, she is so unbelievably motivated. And that's why I want to do the same thing for people as what that teacher did for me.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, the lesson from there as well is pay attention, so that if you have the opportunity to be that kind of person for someone, you actually take it.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah.
And Stacy, as we always say in my house, don't worry about comparing experiences. Something that's, seems small can have huge impacts, for one person. So
yeah, well, it did for me. So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Cool. Next up is, thank you, Stacy, by the way.
Cool.
Next up is Lisa. All right, let me unmute you here. There we go.
Stacy and Shelley's story they were great. I don't know if I have the right story to top those two. Comes to mind, I was taking a CERT class, which is a community-based class, in 2016, and I befriended this lady that was similar to me, and she was really articulate, and she spoke a lot, and every class, like for 3 classes, we would sit by each other and we'd talk. And then we broke up in a class and got in different areas of the class. And these other 2 ladies came up to me and said, "That lady's weird. Don't you think so?" And my response was, "No, she's really smart and very articulate." And the switch was that they weren't expecting me to say that. Just the enlightenment and watching the switch in their minds was like very cool to see. And that was my story.
Yeah, and you had actually, before the podcast, you had articulated really well. I don't know if you can bring the words back, but you had articulated the idea behind that story fairly well. Like, what is the lesson from that? Because I think it's an important one.
Oh, okay. Thank you for bringing that up. It's really important. It's not making a judgment until you get to know the person. Be an open book in meeting people, because it's so exciting if your book is open to fill in the pages as they talk and the experiences that they have, that you get to know the person and integrate that into your true feelings that are positive about the person. And then you overlook everything else that's negative, if there is negativity coming from different areas. So
yeah. And one of the ways that we often fall prey to that is when we hear about someone secondhand before we have the opportunity to make that impression ourselves. So.
Right. It's like we're being gypped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing to think just how prevalent that was, especially in places like high school or any place where you're stuck with a lot of people for a significant amount of time for 12 years. And I think kind of going back to community, I think that is one of the potential dangers, is that it gets so tightly knit that anybody who doesn't fit the criteria can be immediately seen for those differences instead of any additional great qualities they might have. So yeah, I think that's really important. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Next up is Dave.
Thank you very much, Shrikant, Chase, and Alex. I think this is a great thing to give an opportunity for several of us to tell our stories. In our education system, I think a lot of times we're treated like paper dolls or cardboard cutouts that are all the same, and no, we're all very different. But the thing that always comes to my mind, the biggest change in my life, was my divorce recovery weekend. And I've mentioned it a few times before in some of Shrikant's groups, but it was really a big change in my life. I grew up in the Midwest in Kansas, attending church with my family, very much a typical American family. My parents were school teachers, good and evil and good and bad. And had difficulty with relationships, that means girls. So I was late getting married. I was 31, she was 29, and things went pretty well, but it pretty soon became apparent to me that she never really left her family. She was closer to her mother than she was to me. So I took a transfer down to Dallas for a couple of years at a technical training school to try to change that relationship, to try to be closer to her. But it wasn't working out. And I was starting to listen to talk radio, and I heard one host say to somebody that called in, well, if you're in a marriage without any love, why would you stay there? And I'd been in a loveless family growing up. And here I was about getting to be age 45, and people in my family normally live to about age 90. I thought, well, I'm looking forward to 45 more years in loveless marriage. And even though I had this terrible impression of, especially divorced men, of being, so selfish and greedy and everything else, I made a tough decision that I really need to get divorced. And it was terrible on my low self-esteem that I already had. And I went through a period of what I call the not worth living period. And it's very typical in divorce to be suicide part of the time. It's never seriously that far, but I started reading self-help books, pardon me, and pop psychology just to live from one day to the next until I was at a church picnic and a lady said, well, you need to go on this divorce recovery weekend. I said, oh, okay, whatever. And I went on it, and it was amazing. It was led by other divorced and widowed people, and they took turns telling their life stories, just laying their heart out on their sleeve. And it was unbelievable. And we realized it was non-judgmental. And after every presentation, we were given some questions to work on. And we went to a quiet place and wrote in a journal, and got together in a small group and shared. And it was so deep, so wonderful. It was just wonderful for me. And afterwards, I was invited to come on what was called the team to help present other weekends for other people. And so I wrote my speeches, talks, and in Wichita, Kansas, did 5 or 6 down there, and I moved up here, and they needed some people to join their team up here. I said, no, I'm over way past that. And when I came up here, I had a dream about my ex-wife. I realized, maybe I'm not over that. So I came on the team up here and helped for more than 5 or 6 weekends up here. So I was involved for about 10 years. But I started reading psychology, even Carl Jung and everything else. But then I started helping other people, leading a weekly recovery or support group, as well as the recovery weekends. And as I told people, it even changed my Myers-Briggs type. It was such a radical change in my life, but it was been so rewarding to help other people, and it really changed me and helped me become the person I am. But I thank you all. Good night.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Dave. I actually have a question. So, if teaching, I mean, as you said, teaching other people, helping other people to recover from similar situations was an integral part of your own method of recovery. Do you think that that's the required path for most people in that situation? Like, do you think that most people who are going to get the most out of, say, going to one of those camps, those weekends, would really benefit the same way from turning around and becoming part of the team?
It's interesting. We typically invite everyone that participated in the weekend. A lot of times down in Wichita, we'd have about 30 participants or so, and not everyone would, but a lot did. In fact, by the time I left, I think we had about 50 people on our team. So we were doing 3 or 4 weekends a year, and we had kind of a rule not to do more than 2 weekends in a row. So we had quite a few people helping. But as I recall, you folks did a switch with a lady that was running a recovery program in the city.
Yep. Yeah, Amanda
And
Falk runs the dorm.
yeah, and it sounds to me like a very similar situation for her, that she, I think, got a lot of help out of helping people.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, it's not for everybody, but to me, it's a very rewarding thing to do. And it's not everybody's thing, but in fact, I was trainer for a while, teaching people how to facilitate conversations, how to give people equal time, and we all know about that in small groups. But yeah, to me, it's a wonderful way to help other people. It's called paying back, or giving back. It's a great opportunity.
Excellent.
Another thing that you brought up that I want to point out that I think is important is just also bringing it once again back to community, how important it is to have people around us who we trust to kind of help us point out our blind spots or to notice these things, to have somebody else, even like the talk radio person you said, talking about being in a loveless marriage and just causing other ideas that we're not, with the current information and ideas we have, are not generating ourselves. So to get that flow in and out, I think is super important. And I think your story helps understand that.
Yeah, I reinforce the community. As I said, this team really became a family. And because we were all single, divorced adults, we were lonely and missing touch very much. So we very much were into hugging each other. And some of the women realized, because a little fear at first, it wasn't a sexual thing at all. It was just something that we all missed, and it was helped to give each other love.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dave.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. We're going to go to Joe now. You are up.
Thank you. Actually, following everybody's stories is going to be it's going to be quite a challenge. But I appreciate everybody sharing here this evening. I think that there was a genuine switch in my life when I was part of a very dogmatic religious community, and I decided that I needed to break away from that. And it was incredibly difficult because it was a community. But it was something that was not for me, and I know I needed to get outside of that. And when you leave and you're on your own, it can be quite intimidating. So that's a whole story within itself. And while I won't go into those details, that's the switch that I had made. But I found something to fill in that same period was Stoicism in the past few years. And what Stoicism has really done is it's given me a name for something that I've always been doing, and it's the way I've always been living. It also given me context as to the cardinal virtues. And I was in the Catholic faith where, that there was, faith, hope, and charity, which was part of the cardinal virtues, but you start to understand why they were there, and you start to understand why Stoicism virtues has its virtues. And it resonated with me much more. And what it did is it restored a lot of my identity, because all of a sudden I started to think, okay, I just don't need to be dogmatic about the way I was living. And I wasn't necessarily living incorrectly. So it started to fill in a void for me that I felt lonely. And now I am starting to go through a journey of understanding myself. And part of that understanding is doing things like journaling and starting to meditate. And these are Stoic practices where I'm healing from a very traumatic experience when you leave a community. And it starts to give me inspiration as to this is actually possible. I can get better. And I hadn't thought that for the longest time. And so for the idea of community and the idea of 52 living ideas, it has been such a benefit to me. And the breakout rooms and interacting with everybody that's here tonight, but attending discussions with John, attending discussions on with you guys. I mean, it's what really it's given me is hope. And with that kind of change, it's a reminder that there are people that are really interested in this world, and not just being educated and interesting in ideas, but also being ethical. The other thing Stoicism has really given me is it's creating space. It's creating space for me to help other people by understanding what I can control, what I can't control. And then from there, I can start to engage with other people in a more meaningful way. And when you come from something that you're just so dogmatic, you're just surviving, that feeling is like, it's so liberating that, you say every evening to yourself how lucky you really are. And so it's a process. But the fact that I just am now realizing where I was, where I can go to, where I can lead to, it really, it allows you to appreciate the journey that you went through, or the experiences that you went through. Not that I would go through them again in certain cases, but also to know that where other people are hurting, and to kind of help them along the way because you've been hurt. And so I think that that's a really important lesson. So I would specifically speak to the idea of finding Stoicism and in 52 Living Ideas and the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society as well, which we've done some joint meetups. They've been a really fantastic group in my recovery. But this is the first time that in a long time that I feel like it's possible. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I really appreciate you contributing that. It's interesting that you specifically use the words filled some of the gap or filled the gap. And it's interesting to me that you went from something you would describe as dogmatic to something you described as people who are interested in this world, in ideas and being ethical. That's exploratory.
Right.
And those seem to be polar opposites. And yet an exploratory outlook on the world can fill the gap that was left by leaving dogmatism. I think that that's a switch in itself that is worth highlighting. Because I think there are a lot of people who are afraid to let go of dogma in whatever form. It doesn't have to be religious dogma. People are afraid to let go of dogma because it does feel like it's going to, if you don't have the dogma, you're going to lose your community. You're going to lose your identity. But the importance and the benefit of switching to something exploratory, something revisable, something, that has that level of interest in the world, like you said, of ideas and ethics, there's such a huge benefit there.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the idea that the element of sincerity that exists when you're exploring something and you're discovering it versus where you have this prepackaged way of a dogmatic or absolute approach to reality where you have the answers and you're so afraid to upend them. That's where it's been incredibly it's transforming when I start to say, okay, I'm not afraid of exploring answers that I don't know. And it comes back to even something, you're challenging yourself to go into the unknown. And that is a liberating feeling. And it's a transition. It's not easy. It's a transition because sometimes, it's easy to want the answers. But I think that really articulated my transition beautifully. So I appreciate that.
Cool.
I think also another important point is just that it's yours. You know what I mean? You have the freedom to look at Stoicism, and even though other, thousands of other people and, have come up and with their own versions of it, you're able to make it your own and discard things without judgment for you and make it your own personal brand of Stoicism. And that's not, unless you're in a different, kind of circle than I am, that's not frowned upon.
Right. And thank you for being, and it's also the ability that it's also given me the ability to suspend judgment. Like, you understand when you reach your place and how you got there, that everybody has their own way of doing things and you appreciate them for who they are. And it's authentic versus, something that is just being told to you where you're actually forced to make a judgment in a more absolutist type of approach. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, because the idea that Stoicism has really taught me to suspend judgment has probably been the most important lesson in conjunction with the dichotomy of control, that I've taken from it today, to date.
So before we move on, Joe, there's just a quote that made me think of from Scott Barry Kaufman, who I'm going to see if we can get him on the podcast. This guy has amazing ideas. If you haven't heard of him, go read his book, listen to interviews with him. This is a quote from him: "Be curious, not judgmental, in everything you do and with everyone you meet. There's plenty of time left for judgment later if you feel you must." So, all right. With that,
Thank you.
thank you, Joe. We will move to Debra. Is Debra still here?
Yes,
Ah,
I'm
there you
here.
are.
Sorry.
All right, Debra, you're up.
I was fielding a bunch of questions from parents just now.
Sure.
They've been texting me up to 10 o'clock at night. So anyway, I will think about this now. Now, Chase, you had such a perfect segue into what I want to talk about. And I realize that I've probably talked too much about teaching. So I'm not going to talk about that as much, except to say that my goal as a teacher is to get everyone to be their best selves and to find out what they love and what makes their heart race. And so for me, what does that for me is, and ideas and experiences that have changed my mind is world travel. So I was exposed to music as a young girl. I had to learn how to play piano. My parents required all of us to do that at a very young age. And even though I've had some really mean music teachers, I love music so much that it wasn't enough to make me dislike music. And the way it ties into world travel for me is I've been fortunate because I've been to 45 countries and 45 states. And I used to think, so the switch is that I used to think that the world was gigantic and that people were really different and the music was different all over the world. And then from traveling to all those places, and a lot of it I did by myself, or I've been on concert tours where I've sung in some really big choirs, like 300 people with full orchestras. And so since I've been to so many places, and even when I was with a large group, I would wander off by myself and just go down the road less traveled. And I would try to connect with people one-on-one. And I found out that the world is actually really small in a way. And that people want the same things no matter where they are. We want health, we want happiness, we want kindness, we want opportunities, we want to have a great family, to make friends, to explore. And so then by singing in these international concerts, I have discovered that music is a universal language, and I think everyone knows that. But I really got to see it exemplified because I remember singing in Spain. We were in Barcelona. We were in this gorgeous Baroque church, and these little Spanish ladies were just hovering around us like little birds after the concert. And they gave us, I'm not Catholic, what is the thing called? The rosary. They gave us rosary beads after the concert, and it was just so precious. And their Spanish, I think it was Catalonian, and so we didn't really understand them, but they clearly were just beaming and so happy. And it just felt really good to be able to contribute something as a traveler and leave something of myself. And then I found out also when I ask questions and I seek out opportunities, that doors just open up and the world just opens up in all its brilliance with these amazing people to me. And so because of that, my main takeaway is that I feel at home everywhere. I feel like the entire world is my home. It's not just this little condo in Mission Viejo, California. It's just, my home is Istanbul this week. My home is this treehouse in the savannah somewhere this week. And also, I remember one of my yoga teachers saying that if everyone traveled all over the world, we would have no more war and no more racism. Yeah. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Debra. I could not agree more that for all the differences in the world, we are more similar. Far, far more similar. And that's a lesson that everyone could stand a huge reality check on. Amazing.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. I've also heard from other people who have had similar travel experiences, that same thing, feeling at home everywhere. Because once you have spent time with actual people who are local to wherever you're going, and when you've done that enough places, you have that realization in a visceral way that you feel that comfort. And yeah, that's amazing. I would love to
It's a
someday
wonderful
feel that.
feeling. Yeah. You will.
Yeah.
You just have to be brave enough to talk to people and things. Yeah. And just be approachable. Just look really chill and calm. And yeah. I know I'm fortunate because solo women travelers are a lot more approachable than men.
Yeah.
So it helps if you're by yourself and you just put a soft expression on your face and that sort of thing. And you're just like friendly and you say hello in a friendly way and you make eye contact. So there are little tricks.
Yeah.
I'm going to write a book on.
Oh, we lost you for a sec there. I didn't hear the last.
I said I need to write a book one day.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Send it to me. Yeah.
Okay.
Alex, what were you going to say?
I think we're all getting a small dose of that now with the internet too, being able to just chat with somebody across the world and notice that you connect on the same things you connect with your friends on. And, even this group, there's people all over the country and the world, and we're all here talking about the same stuff. So it's definitely eye-opening.
Yeah, I've told Shrikant so many times that I'm so appreciative because I came to New York and I go there regularly, and I found you guys because I always look for lectures and talks, and that's one way I connect with local people. And I found him, and I went to your group live twice. And then when COVID hit, and we went into quarantine, I found you guys online through Meetup. I was 5 years. So happy that I get to be with you guys as much as I want, which is amazing.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Debra. That wraps up our audience contribution on that question. So now we'll go ahead and open up the discussion to the question. And Shrikant, if you want to moderate this section of it, if you have a good idea for how to facilitate this with this many people.
Sure.
The question is, what does it take to change a person's mind? What kinds of ideas and experiences actually shift our perspective? And how do we focus on being the kinds of people that are receptive to those positive changes?
All right, folks, we've heard some amazing stories. This is just great. You can just line up to talk about these questions that Chase posed by typing an exclamation mark or raising your hand in Zoom.
Everyone is too blown away by the discussion to ask questions. Oh.
Shelley, go ahead.
I didn't have a question to ask so much as just really a comment. In my case, I think it was the change came out of necessity, right? So it was forced. And I think then in a situation like that, then you have to ask, well, what causes one to push through something like that as opposed to sink into despair and take no action, right? Because it can be overwhelming if you're forced to make changes, if your whole life changes and you literally had nothing to do with any of the change, right? So then it's necessity, but then it's grappling with that. So I'd love to hear from some of the other people who purposed to make the change instead of it being like in my case and in my story in this instance where it was really literally out of necessity. I had to do something because of the actions of someone else.
Thank you, Shelley. Next up is Joe, and followed by Keaton. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I also was changing out of necessity as well, because the reality was that I wasn't going to be living an ethical life, and there was something that was completely false about the way I was living. So that had to change, and I had to break away. And so that it was it was necessary for my own personal sanity and happiness. Um, one of the most important things, though, I realize in this change, if you're talking about change with other people, is to also have a real understanding that you're very lucky to have made a change, and not to judge others that can't make the change, and whatever the circumstances may be. If I often use this example: if somebody's an alcoholic, and there's two ways they can approach it. They can beat the alcoholism, and they can help other people become become sober themselves, or they can pass judgment and say, I became sober, why can't you? And that's a really important distinction, because you have to have a certain level of appreciation that everybody's experience is a little bit different, and that you were just really lucky to be. I found that groups like this, and the Thinking Society, and Stoicism, and friends that were patient with me. So not everybody has that, and so I need to keep that in mind whenever I'm thinking about somebody, asking them to upend their way of thinking. Is that how they get there. And we've spoken about the importance of community in that process. It really isn't, it is the individual, obviously, but it's also putting the person in a position to succeed as well. So and recognizing that not everybody's going to be able to make that change, but to understand and respect the way they, that their choices at the same time. And that's an important distinction, I think, when we're talking about change for other people and change for ourselves.
Yeah, it's interesting with addressing both what Shelley said and what Joe you said. I mean, this kind of the change is a very delicate mechanism of kind of that switch where you decide that you're going to do something, because it is easy for people to kind of give up, and it is easy for people to never see what is possible. And that little switch, that delicate switch, which you have to do yourself, and then just kind of it spirals, and there is a kind of virtuous loop that begins, but it's the starting point is very, very tiny of that decision. Next up is Cotton, Carl, and Debra. Cotton, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. My I'm not going to go into my background, but my switch, I mean, the biggest one that could pick up, and for the reason is Bob Dylan. I don't know why I say Bob Dylan, because and then going with the road not taken, that kind of thing. So just historically, my background, I have to go in this path to succeed, do this, do science, da 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 da, obey parents, do this way. But I think inside I was always philosophical or artistic inside, but so I obeyed my parents. I did my thing, school, did my career, da 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 da, no regrets, but always inside that's there. So I think some boyfriend in college was into Bob Dylan, and I thought he was really obnoxious or something. But then when the time came right, I started listening, and then I started reading, because I really enjoy literature, poetry, and listening to his lyrics. And then I just went the whole gamut of everybody, like all the poets, or Joni Mitchell, everybody, those guys, everybody. So anyway, that's kind of, and then it's going, and that kind of opened up. So now everything's coming in, everything. And it's like infinite, right? Because it's like, oh no, I can't read this. I can't read this. Anyway, to make a long story short, The way I talk fast because I don't want to take up so much time. So then, you know, fast forward like 40 years or 30 years, however, you know, I'm at this place and my colleagues are at this place. Like, let's say they look like me, you know, they're kind of happy with their big houses and big cars and big everything. Their children are going to this school and this school. But I feel like I don't feel like that's so significant. And so I always feel like, as I say, an alien, you know, like I'm an alien. And you know, a lot of times I get bored, you know, like with talking to them and not to be so arrogant. Like, you know, I guess I would come off as arrogant because I kind of made the switch to not be this conventional path to this weird path, you know, like you guys.
Mhm.
Anyway, like, and like musicians, you know, you just play music, you don't have to really talk, but I just get to like frustration or dissatisfaction, even among like family members, you know. I don't want to get into too much detail, but so then after COVID, I'm like, oh, I don't have my musician orchestras or whatever rehearsals. So I was happy to find like, wow, bunch of aliens, you know, who can kind of like, wow, there are actually other aliens out there. I was shocked. But what I'm saying is, I think it's kind of in there that needs to spring out. And sometimes it's not there, then you're perfectly fine with the cap on. But I think, and I think also believe in, you know, destiny, Carl Jung, everything, you know, I think you're going to get some nudge here and there along the way, you know. So
Mhm.
that's how I do it. So, okay.
Thank you, Cotton. I think, I mean, the idea of kind of, you know, the Stoics had the idea of cosmopolitan, or what Debra was talking about, of basically engaging the world, or what, you know, Dave talked about, kind of being open, sharing experiences. It's all about, you know, or we've talked a lot about kind of authentic relating and what it can do. And that's what, you know, that's why, you know, it feels like aliens in the sense that we are aliens in the sense that we are unusually open to people, not just from our own community, our own little group, but we are genuinely open to people who are very different from us. And we are much more open about sharing our ideas and learning from each other. So I think that's what makes it different. Next up is Carl, Debra, and Dave. Carl, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Shurkan. I just wanted to address Chase's question about what creates, at least what I believe creates that switch. My expertise is in narrative and storytelling, and to us, we always have this saying about character. That true character is how they handle pressure and crisis. And I think Shelley's stories and Joe's stories are a testament to their character. Now, I don't know how their character comes about, right? Could be genetic, could be their personality traits, you know. But to me, that's what it is. The more pressure you have, the more I think you're overcoming. There's a saying about failure is not falling down, it's staying down when you fall, right? And so, you know, fall 8 times, get up 9 times, and that's success, right? So yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. I mean, I think Carl Jung understands this very well.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, you know, he said, in the filth it will be found. It's like, it is because we really don't know what our capabilities are. Seriously, we don't know what we can do. You know, I'm listening to stories like Shelley's and saying, wait a minute, I've not done anything like that, anything that difficult, you know? And so we don't know what our potentialities are. So what happens is that when we actually face a difficulty, the biggest thing we discover, is what we were capable of, and what we were capable of all through this time when we were not actually engaging any of it. So absolutely.
I think, can I just, yeah. So I think that part of that getting up process is actually, I mean, it shows in your character. It's the ability, and I do think this is something that can be trained. It's the ability to, when adversity strikes, continue to face into it instead of facing away and sort of letting it happen to you. I think that that's why when you see people, like I think of John, who many people in this group are familiar with, and he's been on the podcast before, but my friend John is the kind of person who deliberately seeks out adversity to probably one of the highest extremes that I've ever seen, specifically to, in some sense, practice that ability, so that if adversity he didn't volunteer for comes around, he already knows from a character sense what to do. It's just about applying the character he's already got to the situation at hand. And I think that's something that we can all learn from John and from Shelley and from everybody who has stories that relate that experience.
Next up is Debra, followed by Dave. Debra, go ahead.
Okay, so this is not quite as positive, but I wanted to let you guys know, and I'm saying this to Shelley in particular, that even though I just painted this beautiful picture of this wonderful loveliness in my life, I have had a lot of crazy stuff happen when I was younger. And so I wanted to tell her what my reaction is to her thought and question. So I was born into a family where my father was like a very serious alcoholic, really crazy and out of control. So because of that and dealing with that, I developed a really high tolerance for putting up with crap. And I recognize that in myself. So I have this like crazy amount of empathy, and I'd always put myself second in a relationship. But then I also have a lot of self-preservation, and I can be very pragmatic. So once I pull myself out of this dreamland, then self-preservation kind of kicks in. And then I look at mistakes other people made, like say marrying a guy like that, and I pull myself out of it and I say, wait a minute, I'm putting this person first. I need to put myself first. And then I think it has a lot to do with personality types too, because I inherited my mother's personality, and she was like very strong in character. And the positive thing about having gone through all that adversity as a child for so many years is that I'm able to use that strength in my teaching and to be very empathetic with many different people. And so, again, I think that when something like that happens, like for me, you asked if we were forced into it or not. I was in a relationship with a guy. He was bipolar, but actually stable. And I just said, if he's not taking his medication, this is kind of personal, but it sounds like the night for it, and that I would cut him off because it was getting to the point where it's getting dangerous. And so I gave it a deal breaker date that if he doesn't get it together by the end of the year, I'll break up with him the second week of January. And that's what I ended up doing. I had to get the police involved and everything. But so from then on, I surround myself with people who have reciprocal relationships with me. If I can give them love, they can give me love. If I can give them a shoulder to cry on, they can give that to me too. So I think that no matter what we go through, the wonderful thing about it is this strength of character we get and how we can relate to other people so much better from going through that. And so for me, the reason I haven't gone to a therapist is my singing, because that is my therapy. And that has just been everything for me, as you could probably tell. So see, I tied it together and I related to Shelley. Thank you.
Thank you, Debra. Next up is Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Shrikant. I'm a member of Veterans for Peace, many of you know, and I'm on our homeless working group, homeless veterans. And it just occurred to me that I don't want to get into Shelley's story, but I suspect things were touch and go for a while. And I think for a lot of people, a big change like that in your life could be overwhelming. And I think that's where a lot of people end up homeless, because they just can't deal with it and they don't have people to fall back on, whether it be church or family or whatever. 12,000 in Seattle, and I just found out in my county as south of Seattle as 3,000 in this town of Tacoma. And to me, I'm very ashamed of our society. The richest country in the world is not taking care of our own people. But just want to make that comment. And again, Shelley, congratulations on you to pull through and make a success of yourself.
Thank you, Dave. Anybody else? Okay. So this has been an amazing day. So I thought this was very special. I think this is one of the best episodes I've seen because of just because these are like core parts of people's lives and core parts of who they are. I mean, the thing is that I really like doing these meetups because I get to interact with people like this. And I knew right from the beginning, whenever, when Chase and Alex proposed this idea, I said, okay, I just look through the list and say, okay, these are the people I have to ask them if they want to say something. And I'm just honored and grateful that so many of you took that up. And, just thank you so much. I mean, it's very inspiring, relatively, I have had an easy life and I've had some challenges and I've grown tremendously with challenges, but it's always, for me, I think that for all of us, what we can do is undiscovered territory. And it is actually very large of what we can do. So to me, kind of hearing these stories is very inspirational. Next up is Joe. Joe, go ahead.
I just want to add one thing to that. One of the things that have also been through my transition is that, working again with the Philadelphia Thinking Society and their ability to allow me to be wrong, but also the 52 Living Ideas community that you've created has been absolutely critical in this effort, because there was something that you said to me before I presented the other evening. And that was for the Stoicism presentation. And I said, I'm kind of nervous. And you said, why are you nervous? You're amongst friends. And you've created a community where people do feel safe to explore. And, that is something that is worth more than any, amount of money, anything. It's just, and it is as critical to my personal growth, specifically in the past few months. And every time I get a little bit tired and thinking maybe am I not going to make it tonight, maybe, and I think to myself, Shakran's putting this on. So I'm like, I say to myself, I can show up. Mm-hmm. It's just, I can do my part by just showing up. Mm-hmm. And, that's a really critical part of my personal recovery and growth in this period. And after a period of time, the meditation and the things that come along those lines is, so what I'm trying to say is the 52 Living Ideas and the people that make up that community, Chase, Alex, Roger, the regular presenters, that is an example for us, and that changes people's lives. So I think that that's something also to recognize, is that you're changing people's lives without maybe understanding the magnitude by which you're actually doing it.
Well, thank you, Joe. I mean, I really appreciate, and I have to say that, your participation, and especially yours connecting the two groups that you really value, the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. I mean, it's a remarkable group of people, CJ and Sanjay and, just Maxine and just a whole bunch of people. And what has happened is that, you were the one to actually see it, that, oh, they are similar kind of people. And you told me, you have to talk to CJ. And I did. And within like very short period of time, we have we have all these Wednesdays full till end of September, and I have to schedule things on Sundays, and it's all, so it's just a complete win-win. So thank you so much. I really appreciate. Next up is Kavita, followed by Shelley.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for sharing all your inspirational stories and your personal life. It was very nice to know each one of you, and I'm part of this group. I'm so honored to be here. And everyone's story has a connection with mine own, like in every sort of way, because I had traveled, moved out of my country. I have nobody here. So that forced me to a necessity of doing things by myself, which I have never tried before in my life. And also Shelley's situation, I have a similar situation to that, but I don't want to get into the details. But then I just stopped blaming people. Instead, I took up the responsibility and to do things. And there's no community or support. Yeah. And, being judged and all that, I've become so stronger. And I think 52 Living Ideas has gotten me this place where I can actually, listen to people's conversations, which is so inspirational. Day to day, I'm taking so much away from it. I don't talk much because I don't have so much to articulate myself, but I think now I've started journaling because of Stoicism. So like everything is like, I'm like Ketan said, it was like a boom, like everything's starting to falling in place. I'm trying to figure, I'm actually getting so emotional. So my voice is also kind of like, I'm like so happy. That's the reason for it. It's like tears with so much joy that I can't express it more than this. It's just great. Like knowing about Carl Jung, Jordan Peterson, and Stoicism, meditation, everything has like set my life. I was like wandering, not knowing what to do with my life, how to figure out things. But now I think I have like set out a schedule for myself. I'm just looking up for 9 o'clock when it is going to be, when it's 2:30 on Saturday. So I don't have to worry about what I'm going to do next. Like my life was being so, I had no purpose or something. And I was almost giving up that I was going to quit my job and go back to my country, to go back to my own people, because I thought I always wanted to do something else, because I'm an occupational therapist. I used to work with autistic kids and special needs kids. But when I got here, I'm working with older adults, like geriatric population, and I don't see much growth there. And I'm very limited in applying my techniques that I learned. And I feel like I'm not given the liberty to do things, always being questioned, always being criticized. But, when I started applying, being more virtuous, being strong in what I want to do, and then how I relate myself to my patients has gotten me a good relationship with everyone I work with, that they started looking into what I've been doing, and they say to me, you know what you're doing, girl, you look like like you just passed out of college or from school, but your way of thinking is like so much mature than the adults we are dealing with, so that kind of feedback I'm getting when I started to sort out things in my life. So I think 52 Living Ideas is where I landed, where I found my aliens, I think. Actually, you're not aliens. Like, you're like gods to me, literally. That's how I feel. So thank you, everyone, for sharing all your personal stuff. It's just really inspirational to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kavita. And I think the way in which people like Carl Jung or Louis Sullivan or Buckminster Fuller look at us is that these are human beings. This is what human beings are and are supposed to be. We are a little bit more like that, like human beings than others, because people get lost into very specific things that they're doing. They become creatures of habit, and they lose, and they have a lot of fear. that is stopping them from doing things. So all it is that we are, I think, a little bit more of human beings, but there is a long way to go for each of us. So thank you very much, and thank you for joining us in the journey. It's really, and thank you for all your feedback. Next up is Shelley.
Kavitha, I hope I'm saying your name right, but that was really inspirational, and thanks for speaking up and sharing. And I just really loved hearing how everything is impacting you and your career so positively. And Shrikant, it's kind of a little bit of a Shrikant love fest tonight. And I just wanted to add one more thing. Mm-hmm. So I remember at a meetup recently, you made a comment comparing yourself, like, your impact is small compared to someone like Carl Jung or, someone this global. But where's Stacy, our mathematician? Because if you take like all the people that you have direct impact that join your meetups, right? And then you multiply them by all the people that they're interacting with. I mean, you're probably like impacting more people than Carl Jung. Or, I don't know, Stacy, can you figure that math out for us a little bit? Anyway, we love you, Shrikant.
Well, thank you.
I'll get to work on the equation.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Shelley. But it's a very large world. There are 10 billion people out there, and I think that the human potential is very large, and there are so many people who are kind of, for various reasons, mostly fear. Mostly it's kind of internal. It's not external. Mostly it's internal things that stop people. So I think that the scale of what is possible is very large. So I do think that it's like what we've done so far is very, very tiny. It's a good start, but I think it's very, very tiny. And it's a long way to go, both kind of at a personal level. Like I'm telling you, it's like I'm looking at these stories and say, hey, Shrikant, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is nothing. I need to do more. So I'm, thank you. And I just appreciate all the comments. And I really, more than anything, I appreciate all you human beings, who keep showing up every time. I'm very grateful because it's kind of materially adds to my life. It's like we have so much to learn from each other. And there are places where, we have faced certain things that other people have not. And the other person can look at it. There are some aspects that you can learn. Like there are all these things that stop us and you don't even know that they are stopping us. And then you see somebody else just go through something which you thought was a wall that was stopping you. And they say, wait a minute, there was no wall. I just imagined that there was a wall there. So there is just so much to be learned. So thank you very much, everybody. Really
well, I just to comment on what you're saying is the potential in humanity is enormous. And I think this is why I do better, I think, sharing my story on a one-on-one basis. I've not ever done it with a larger group like that. But I want people to know that the potential within you, it's almost limitless. I mean, we are coded with our DNA, right? So we can't achieve everything under the sun if it comes to our mind. But the desires in your heart and the ideas that come to your mind, like that's significant. Evaluate them. And you do have potential. And Shrikant, these places here, we can encourage one another and build one another up to go for the gusto, go big. Don't dream small, dream big and go for it. And I think 52 Living Ideas is a big dream, and I love it.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Shelley. All right. So on that note, I think this has been amazing. So thank you very much, everybody. And thank you very much, Chase and Alex. Chase and Alex, do you have any kind of closing thoughts, or shall we call it a night?
Chase, do you have anything?
Yeah. Again, I want to echo the thank yous to everybody who shared and to everybody who's contributing, and to you, Shrikant, for all the work that you've put into creating this magnificent and massive experience that, like Shelley said, is multiplying out into the world. I think the last point that I want to make that I think is part of everyone's mind change switch story, but that wasn't highlighted quite yet, is attention. I think that unless you have the capacity to pay attention, even if you have necessity, even if you have pressure, even if it's inside you somewhere, and even if you have some understanding, the capacity to pay attention is so paramount to opening yourself to opportunity and to be able to change your mind when the time comes. I think that that's just the last aspect that I want to highlight, and I think that's how I want to wrap up my takeaway from this is the
Absolutely. I have to add on the attention, because it's such a huge point. It is the lever. It is the point of maximum leverage. William James put it in terms of, will is paying attention to difficult objects. We tend to run away from difficult objects, outside and inside. Will is your ability to pay attention to it. The entire Indian thought is based on this idea of attention, concentration, of being able to pay attention where you need to pay attention, and doing that relentlessly. And that is the most transformative thing in the world. And each of us has that capacity at every moment in life. So that is the point of maximum leverage. So folks, again, this has been one of the best, amazing meetups, and hope to do another, hope to use this as a base and go up from here. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, everybody, for my final takeaway. Just thank you. I'm really grateful for everybody sharing their story. That's something that I think this whole group has helped me out a lot with as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. I'm very excited. I feel great.
Bye.